Okay, excuse me. I think we're just about ready to get started. Okay, recording, cool. Welcome everyone. This is the Flexibility of Drupal, 9 ways to alter a menu item. So real quickly, a little bit about myself. My name is Michael Miles. I work in Boston, Massachusetts as the Associate Director of PHP for a company called Genuine. We are a full-service digital agency specializing in everything from brand engagement, SEO, what else? Video, design, development, and we have offices in Chicago, Boston, New York, and San Francisco. Drupal development is a small part of what we do, but it's a large part of what I do. Myself, I've been, what happened there? Okay, I've been working with Drupal since 2008, and I've done everything from content entry on a Drupal site, theme development, to architecting and deploying global platforms for global brands. I'm an Acquia Grandmaster, which means I've passed 3 Acquia certifications, and I was also named a 2014 Acquia MVP. You can find more about me on Twitter at MikeMiles86. Drupal.org at MikeMiles86, anywhere on the internet, basically MikeMiles86. So I have a couple goals for this session. The first of which, to show you that there is no right way, just the right, for me, way to change data in Drupal. It all depends on your skill set, your abilities, and the time and budget you have, depending on which method you choose to manipulate data. So to outline this, I'm going to demonstrate many different methods you can use in Drupal to manipulate data. And for each of those methods, I hope to teach you some considerations you should take into account, pros and cons for each method, so when you face yourself with those situations, you can weigh those pros and cons. Ultimately, my goal of this session is to prove to you that Drupal is very flexible, and no matter what you need to change, there's a way to change it. And to do this, the examples we'll use are manipulating menu items, as the title of my topic expressed. Why menu items? Well, they're on just about every Drupal site. Every website on the internet has a menu, and all those menus contain menu items. So they're a very recognizable global element. In Drupal, a menu item can be manipulated in many places. It falls into many parts of the Drupal stack, on the database level, on the server side, and rendered to the client. And what we'll focus on changing are 3 things. The title, so what the menu item says, the destination, where it goes and how it gets there, and then the display, how the user sees the menu item. So why should you care about how to manipulate menu items? Who cares about changing menu items? Well, menu items are just data to Drupal. Information stored in your database, pulled from the database, processed and sent to the user. Everything in Drupal is just data, saved in the database with settings or some other changes as content, pulled onto the server and displayed to the user. If something's a piece of data, it can be manipulated. Vis-a-vis, everything in Drupal can be manipulated. So the methods I'm going to outline extend far beyond just using them to alter menu items, but anything in Drupal, you should be able to use one of these 9 methods to change its data. So to do this, the environments I'm going to use, what happened? 1 second, sorry. My slides are a little messed up. Environments. So I have a Drupal 7.37 standard install using a Bartik subtheme in the slate color, so it's really boring. I also have a Drupal 8 beta 11 standard install, Bartik subtheme with slate color. I apologize for this talk. I didn't have time to update my Drupal 8 environment to the latest beta release. And the standard wording for Drupal 8, Drupal 8 is still in development, which means any code I do show you for Drupal 8 is subject to change. But at this point, with only 5 critical issues remaining for Drupal, everything's pretty stable. Then finally, the environments I'm going to use for my examples are not live. Blame Murphy's Law for that, which states anything that can happen will happen, which means anytime you use live environments for a presentation, the live environment will not work. So I have some GIFs and screenshots and code examples. So here's the shot of our Drupal 7 site in what I like to call the infomercial before photo. It's gray and boring. Has 9 links, our main menu. And then this is the after we will get to by the end of the presentation, these colorful links here. And then our Drupal 7 site, boring and gray again. And afterwards, the colorful links that are provided by the manipulation methods we're going to use. So data manipulation, in my mind, happens in 3 general layers. The first of which is the database. So this is when data, this is dealing with data that is stored in your database, MySQL, Postgres, CouchDB, or no SQL solution, information that's stored in a database that Drupal then uses to render data. Data manipulation can happen on the server side, mainly with PHP code, because Drupal is a PHP application, framework, CMS, whatever you want to call it, built on top of PHP, an open source framework, language. So you have access to server-side code where you can make data manipulations there. And then finally, on the client side, manipulating data using HTML, JavaScript, or CSS before or when it's being rendered to your users. So let's talk about the database layer first. With these next couple methods, what I'm going to be dealing with is editing data or manipulating data that's being stored in, sent to, or retrieved from your database. The first way you can do that is using the Drupal core UI, or what's known as the admin interface. The pros of using core UI, nothing extra is needed. Drupal out of the box come with the admin interface that gives you certain options where you can go ahead and make changes. Those changes are then stored to the database. No coding experience needed. You don't need any additional modules, any additional functionality. It's what Drupal gives you. The admin interface is an easy-to-use interface, and I have easy in quotes here because Drupal has a known learning curve to it. That's mainly for development, but there's also a learning curve for where things are located in the admin interface. This is also particularly true as some things have changed in Drupal 8, which is the latest upcoming release of Drupal. But once you learn the interface, you know how things are organized, and you have an easy time of going through and making data changes. And you know any changes you make using the core UI are stable. This means that when you make a change on the admin interface, you save those changes, you are confident that those changes are stored correctly in your database, and they will stay there until you make additional changes. So they are stable changes. Cons, Drupal's core UI has limited capabilities. It's not everything for everybody out of the box. It only does so much, which means you may want to change data in a certain way, and the admin interface doesn't give you the method to do so. You may also find out that a solution that the admin interface provides you may be too broad. Maybe you can only make sweeping site changes when you want to make changes for a very specific context. Flip side of that, some of the solutions provided by admin UI are too narrow. You can only make a change to a particular, say, menu item without indicating what context it's being used and when you want to have that change take effect. TLDR of this method, it's easy to use, but with limited functionality. So here we have our Drupal 7 site. I'm clicking on Structure as an admin, clicking on Menu. Then I'm going to my main menu, and I'm clicking on List Links. Then I'm going to edit my first menu link. And what I can do with the core UI is I can change the title of this link. I'll have it say DB number 1. I can change the path to have it point to a different location, so I'm updating the title and the destination. Then I can save my changes. So with the admin interface, I've changed the title, and I've changed the destination. Now when the user comes to my site and my page loads for a user, my first link says DB number 1, and it points to a different place than it did before. I've altered that data. Very simple using the core UI. Drupal 8, it's the same thing. I go to Structure. I click on Menus. My main navigation menu, I can edit that menu, which gives me the links in that menu, and I can edit the first link. And I can change the title to say DB number 1. I can change the path that it points to, have it point to alt path. So again, I'm using the core UI to change the title, so what the user sees, and the destination. I see those changes have been saved in my database. User comes to my Drupal 8 site, and now they see my first link says DB number 1 and points to alt path. I've manipulated the data using the core UI. Pretty simple. Second way I can manipulate data on the database level is using modules. So modules are, if you're unfamiliar with modules are in Drupal, they're what are also known as plugins, say in WordPress or other applications. They're contained pieces of functionality which extend Drupal. The pros of modules, the first one is that they extend Drupal core. So Drupal modules allow you additional functionality that Drupal core doesn't have out of the box. There are a variety of modules available. Today, on Drupal.org, there are over 300,000 modules available. This means if there's a piece of data you need to change and you need a specific way to change it, you can probably find a module that already does it. But if you can't, again, Drupal is open source, which means if it doesn't exist, you can build your own. 1 second, I'm just going to fix my presentation slides. Give me a second, sorry. Speaker notes. Whoa. Whoa, 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 what happened there? Okay, sorry about that. If you can't find a module that suits your needs, then you can build your own, depending on your skill set and you're comfortable doing that. And you can write a module that then makes a database query and changes your database. The cons of using modules to make database changes: modules add complexity to your Drupal site. By definition, you're adding additional code, additional functions. So you're increasing your code base, increasing the processing that Drupal has to do. Specifically in Drupal 7 and before, if you have a module enabled, Drupal is going to hit some part of its code on every page load. Drupal 8, we handle that a little differently thanks to object-oriented functionality. Modules may do way more than what you need it to. So you may only need a small subset of functionality a module gives you. It may do 6 other things that now you have exposed on your site for other administrative users or editors that you're not confident in having them make changes. They have the ability to make some additional changes that you may not want them to. And finally, modules have the potential for security issues. So a community module that you get from Drupal.org, used by hopefully a lot of people, if someone finds a security issue, they submit an issue to the issue queue, submit a security patch. There are security alerts that go out for core and module security issues, and you can patch those modules. But there is the potential that there is a small amount of time where your site may be open to a security hole because of the module you're using. So it's just a small risk you have to take into account when you're deciding to use a module to solve database manipulation, data manipulation, sorry. TLDR of using modules, they're extensive, but with added complexity. So here we have in Drupal 7, I want to be able to change some additional information about my menu items. And I find a module called Menu Attributes. And what Menu Attributes allows me to do is set some additional attributes for menu items, such as the ID, the name, target where it points to. I can add a CSS class. I can add some inline styling, etc. Great. This is going to give me more control through the admin UI. It's going to extend the core UI of what I can do. So I go to my Drupal 7 install, and I use Drush, which is a command line interface for working with Drupal. In Drush, I'm going to use the download command, or the DL shortcut, to download the Menu Attributes module to my Drupal 7 site. It downloads. Awesome. I then use Drush again and use the enable command with the shortcut EN to enable the Menu Attributes module, if I spell it correctly. Great. Yes, I want to enable it. So now the module has been downloaded and installed on my Drupal 7 site. So now I go back to my admin. I go to Structure, Menus. I edit the links for my main menu, and I go to edit link number 2. Still using the core UI, I can change the title. Still using the core UI, I can change the path. And now I have this whole new section in the admin interface where I can set these additional attributes because of this module. So I'm going to set the style. And this is going to, when I click Save after setting the background color and the text color, the Menu Attributes module is going to make a database query, and it's going to save this data in the database. It's going to make a stable change. And then I click Save. I see those changes have been saved in my database, and now when a user comes to my site and Drupal renders the menu and grabs the menu items from the database, it pulls those settings that have been saved by the menu attributes module, and I see this my users see this nice yellow link. That's the second one that says DB number 2. Now for Drupal 8, not surprisingly, there is no Drupal 8 release for menu attributes. Drupal 8 is not out yet. Menu attributes probably isn't the most popular module that needs to have a Drupal 8 release right away, so there's no release. However, I am confident in my abilities as a developer, so I can write my own module to do what menu attributes does for Drupal 8. Two things you need for a Drupal module in Drupal 8. You need an info.yaml file and a DOM module file. Info.yaml is just the file that you use, a structure file you use to tell Drupal the information about your module. I give it a name. I call it Drupal Flex Demo. I tell it it's a type module. I give it a description about what the module does, what version of Drupal works for, and what package it should be listed under. Now my DOM module files and modules are where you put your majority of your PHP code, your server-side code that's going to interact with Drupal. In this example, I'm using what's known as a hook, and I'm going to talk about hooks in a little bit. To hook, for lack of a better word, to hook into when an entity is being updated. An entity is basically a piece of data in Drupal. And on line 7 of this example code, I'm checking to see if this entity that's being updated, so it's about to be updated to the database, is of type menu link. Then on line 8, I check to see, well, if it has the title of DB number 2, and it is for the main menu, then run a database update query using the database API on lines 9 through 19. With this, I'm going to update an options column to set some style attributes in the target. This code example here is basically what menu attributes does when you save your changes in the admin UI. It makes a database query that updates the options column in the database and saves the styling. So just like any modules in my Drupal site, I need to enable my custom module. So I turn back to Drush, my command line interface for Drupal. I use the enable command with the en keyword and a shortcut, and I enable my dflex demo module. Now, in my Drupal 8 site, when I go to structure, menus, edit menu, and I edit my second link, I can, again, using Core UI, I'm going to change the title. I'm going to alter the path to point to a different location. I don't have any additional settings here because of my custom module, but when I hit save, Drupal hits my hook, my custom module, which runs an additional database query. And we can already see the changes here with my highlighted DB number 2 link for my main menu. And that's what the user sees as well. So now when Drupal goes to render my menu for a user, it pulls this additional data I've stored to my database to alter the display of my menu item. Finally, a third way you can manipulate data on the database level in Drupal is by writing direct queries. This is interacting directly with your Drupal database, foregoing accessing Drupal or interacting with Drupal in any way whatsoever. The pros of this method is they're extremely powerful. Writing queries are extremely powerful because you're directly manipulating the data that Drupal is using. You're going right to the source and you're changing a value. And then Drupal is going to pull that value and display it or use it in some way. This means your changes can be implemented quickly. Not that writing queries is quick, but as soon as you change data in your database, that changed data is going to be used by Drupal, depending on certain caching systems you may have set up. The cons of this method: queries can be complex. Drupal is known to have a very complex database scheme. There are lots of tables involved, in Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 especially. This means that if you are not 100% sure of where a piece of data lives in the database, changes you make with a direct query may not be stable. If you only update the data in one table, and then you really need to update 3 tables, best case scenario, users aren't going to see what you want them. Worst case scenario, you're going to break something and it's going to cascade. Because of this, direct queries can also be very dangerous. I think we're all familiar with the story of Little Bobby Tables. For those of you who don't know who Little Bobby Tables is, I recommend doing a Google search for XKCD 327. The gist of the story is there's a mother who named her son Robert : drop student's table. She gets a phone call from the school that says, "Did you really name your student your son this?" And it's like, "Oh yes, Little Bobby Tables we call him." It's like, "Well, oh, we just lost all our student information." Mom's like, "Well, I guess you learned a thing about data sanitization." So right information and wipes out your Drupal site. TLDR for this method is powerful, but can be dangerous. So in Drupal 7, all menu items are controlled by the menu links tree table. And here we have a couple columns. We have a menu name, the name of the menu that the link is part of, the unique ID for the menu link, the path that it links to, the title that the user sees, and an options column, which you'll see on row 2 for DB number 2. This is the array that the menu attributes module actually saves. This is what it does. It runs a query, an update query, and updates the options column. But I don't need a stick-in module. We can do it ourselves. So I write an update query to run my database. I'm going to update the menu links table. And on line 4, I'm going to set the options column to the serialized array I've serialized to set the background style and color. I'm going to change the title, so what the menu item says. I'm going to change the path on line 6 to where it goes. I'm going to add some conditions to only do this for the main menu and for a link that currently points to node 3. So I copy this query, and I go back to my Drush command line interface, and I can use the SQL command or the SQL query command. I paste in my query, I hit enter. Hopefully it runs with no errors, and it does. I don't get any errors. Pass, excuse me, which means this query has been run in my database. Now when Drupal pulls my menu from the database, it has those additional settings I've saved in that query, and my third menu item here is this orange link, DB number 3. Pretty much the same thing in Drupal 8. Drupal 8 uses the menu tree table to control menu links. Again, some of the same columns. There's the menu name, which is the name of the menu link's part of, an ID, the root parameter keys, and root parameters are how Drupal knows where this link should point to. It has a title option, so what the link should say. And again, it has an options column. And on our second item here, DB number 2, this is what my custom module in the previous example did. When it ran an update query, it updated this column and set that serialized array. But again, I don't need a module to do this. I can write my own query. So I write an update query. I'm going to update again the menu tree. I'm going to set the options to some background style and color, change the title and where it points to. And then I'm going to do this for the main menu on the menu item that currently points to node 3. Copy my query, go back to Drush for Drupal 8. Again, using the SQL queue command or SQL query command, and I paste in my query. I hit enter, runs correctly, no errors. When Drupal pulls up my menu from the database, it gets those additional options I've just saved with that query, and my user sees an orange link for the third one. So those are some ways you can manipulate data on the database side. Let's look at the server side. And for the server side layer, I'm going to talk about the point where data has been retrieved from your database and before it's going to be rendered to the client. That's the part we're talking about with server side. First way you can do this is with what are known as hooks. Hooks are basically specially named functions that Drupal knows to look for. So when an action occurs in Drupal, it basically says, hey, let me find any modules that have functions that have this certain name. If I find that, send this data to that module, let the module do what it wants, send me back the data, and then I'll change it, and I'll do what I want. Pros of using hooks. Hooks are provided by core modules, so there are plenty there. Right out of the box, Drupal has a lot of modules. Hooks are the easiest way to extend core. In fact, up until before Drupal 8, they were the way that modules extended Drupal core, with some exceptions. However, but the way modules work is they implement hooks that Drupal looks for. That's how Drupal knows about modules. That's how the menu attributes from our previous example it calls a hook to add its settings to that admin interface. It uses a hook to do that. And there are many hooks available. Again, provided by Core, has a lot of hooks. They're documented online as well as in Drupal. And then any modules, very popular modules, have a lot of hooks. They also have an API file included with them, or they should, that explain what the hooks do. So there are many places that hooks allow you to write code to interact with data on the server side. The cons of using hooks, they're not used everywhere. Not everything is accessible via a hook. They're used in a lot of places, but some functions just output data, some functions just take in data, and they don't have any hook events. You hope that third-party modules do use custom hooks. Those are hooks that they define, as opposed to ones defined by Drupal core. But you may find out they don't. Hooks you do find may also be too broad or narrow. So there may be a hook to manipulate a whole menu instead of just a specific menu item. And then hooks may happen either too early or too late in the process. So there may be a hook in the case of menus that allows you to mess with the menu after it's been turned into HTML but before it's been sent to the client. And you want to interact with it before the PHP array gets turned into HTML. TLDR of using hooks, they are the core method for extending core. It's how you extend core. So in our Drupal 7 site, we have our custom sub-theme, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, based off of Bartik. I'm not going to go into what you need for a sub-theme, but I have the very bare bones of what you need to write a sub-theme. And one of the things I have, you can see, is a template.php file, which is what's important to pay attention to here. And in this template.php file, that is how themes can interact with server-side code. And that's where themes put what are known as theme hooks. And here, in my custom theme, I'm implementing a theme underscore links double underscore menu name hook. So theme and menu name are placeholders. That tells me I should replace them with the theme. I'm replacing it with the name of my theme, which is dflex. We can see this on line 4. And then I can replace menu name with the specific name of the menu. So I can make this hook very specific, so it only runs for main menu. And that's what I do. I call it system main menu, which is the name of the menu. So when Drupal is going to theme the links for my main menu, it's going to hit my hook, pass the variables array, which inside of that contains a list of all the links for that menu item, for that menu. And on line 6, I can do some custom logic to say, hey, if this menu link is currently pointing to node 4, on lines 7 through 10, I can say change where it's going, change what it says, and add some additional style attributes. And then send those links on to be themed and rendered as usual on line 13. That's what Drupal does. Drupal grabs my menu from the database when a user comes to my site. It sends the links to go be rendered, which hits my theme hook. My theme hook does some logic to change the information, sends it off to be themed as menu links, and then rendered up on the page to the user. And we see this red link here that says SS number 1, our 4th menu item. Drupal 8, from our previous examples, we have a custom module. So why not, that already has a hook in it, so why don't I just add another hook to it since I'm already hooking into some events? So in my .module file, I add a new hook. It's called hook preprocess hook. And again, hook, the second hook, all in caps, is a placeholder telling me I can replace it. So with hooks and modules, the first hook I'm replacing with my module name, which is dflex demo. Then the last hook I'm replacing with the name menu. So you'll see the instance of this hook, I cannot get as specific as main menu. I can only get specific as for menu. So this hook is going to run for all menus. But inside of it, I put some custom logic on line 5 to check that we're only manipulating stuff for the main menu. Then on line 6, I'm running through all the menu links. And line 7, I'm checking to see if this menu link points to node 4. Then through lines 8 through 14, I am changing the title and changing some information about the menu link itself, adding some styling, and setting its target to blank. So when my Drupal 8 site, a user comes to it, Drupal pulls my menu from the database. It sends it to be pre-processed. It hits my pre-process hook. I manipulate the data, send it on its way to be processed and then rendered, and Drupal sees the site. My user sees my new altered menu item, SS number 1. Is there anyone here who is not a beginner to Drupal? All right, I expect some boos from you people for this next method. Another way you can manipulate data on the server side is by hacking Drupal core. And I know I said at the beginning of the talk there is no right way or wrong way to change data. This is going to be the wrong way, but it's a valid way. So the pros of hacking core. You have absolute control over Drupal if you hack Drupal core. Drupal, again, as I've said before, is open source. It's PHP. You can go right into the code, anywhere in the code, and you can change it and make it. You can mess with it. You can rip out the guts of a function and replace it with your own. So you have the ability to change any core functionality to do what you want. If you say to yourself, I don't like how Drupal is rendering menu items or pulling in from the database, I'm going to go ahead and fiddle with it. You can do that. That means hacking core is very powerful. It's a very powerful way to get Drupal to do what you want because you're replacing what Drupal wants to do with what you want it to do. Some of the cons of hacking core, of which there are many, but I'm only going to list 3 for this presentation, is 1, it may cause unknown issues. This is because Drupal is built a certain way, and if you mess with a core system, a core function, you have to make sure you know how that core function is being used. If other modules are depending on it, changing data or sending back data in a certain way, and you alter that, there's a cascading effect of problems that you could cause that you may not even realize. Hacking core is going to break your upgradability. If you hack Drupal core and a new release of Drupal comes out and you update your release of Drupal, that update is going to wipe out your hack, which is good in the long run, but in the short term, if your site depends on that hack you've written, that means you're going to lose your functionality and your site's going to be quote unquote broken. And finally, you introduce security risks if you hack Drupal core. Again, Drupal core is built in a certain way. It's vetted and tested and runs through a gauntlet of tests, and many users interact with it and they find security holes. If you are writing your own code and you're not being too careful about it, you may introduce insecure code. You may wipe out security features that are functions that have been put into place. You're opening yourself up to security risks. I like to think of hacking core as the Uncle Ben method for manipulating data. With great power comes great responsibility. You have extreme power over Drupal core, over Drupal if you hack core. But you have to assume a lot of responsibility and risk. If you're building your own site, that's not that big of a big deal. You may be comfortable assuming that responsibility. But if you do client-facing work and you're dealing with a client site, and you may not want to assume that responsibility when you could just let the masses of Drupal handle it for you by not messing with core. That being said, let me show you how to hack Drupal core to mess with menu items. So on our Drupal 7 site, all menu functionality is controlled by menu.inc in the includes folder of Drupal. Inside menu.inc, there's a function called menu navigation links. Takes an argument of the menu name and the level, and it basically builds the menu tree as a PHP array. So on line 12 of this function, I'm putting some custom logic as we loop through the items in the menu tree to check to see if it's for the main menu, and this link, that current link is pointing to node 5, change some of its data. Have it point to a new node, change its title, add some styling, change the target. Put in my custom logic, user comes to my site, Drupal uses its core functionality to grab the menu from the database, and of course, it hits my hacked code because it's part of core, and it changes and alters my 5th link there to say SS number 2, this nice black link. I've hacked core successfully. Drupal 8, pretty much the same thing. Menu links in Drupal 8 are controlled by the menu link tree class. A little bit, it's object-oriented, thanks to Symfony 2. Inside this class, there's a lot to it, but it has this method called build items, which builds the items for a menu tree. There's a loop inside there where I can loop through all the menu links, and on lines 9 through 20, I can then see if this current menu item is for the main menu and it's currently pointing to node 5, then let me change the title, change some of the URL attributes, set in the style and target, put that back in the array, and send it on its way and let the rest of Drupal handle it. Again, the user comes to my site. Drupal pulls up the menu from the database, uses the menu link tree class to build the menu links, hits my custom logic that I've hacked into Drupal core, changes my 5th menu item. So again, at the beginning of this talk, I said I was going to say to you that there is no right way to do anything in Drupal, just the right for me way. But hacking Drupal core is the wrong way to do things and change data in Drupal. You can do it, but you shouldn't. Credit goes to Greg Dunlap for this image around 2008, I think. Every time you hack core, God kills a kitten. So please think of the kittens and only hack core if your very last resort. Like if you're on the Titanic and it's going down, but you have to push that change to the user, and all you have time to do is hack core, maybe that's okay. Actually, it's not okay, but maybe that's all you can do because you're in freezing water. Who knows? Luckily, in Drupal 8, we have a new concept called services that we're introduced to, which can alleviate the need for hacking core. So the pros of services is services allow you to change any core functionality, but no hacking is required, which is a very good pro. So in Drupal 8, services are basically classes that control core functionality. And what Symfony 2 allows you to do in Drupal is say, hey, Drupal, I know you have this class that handles, say, the database level, or that handles building menu links. I want you to use my class instead. Here's where my class is located. And Drupal's going to be like, okay, you want me to use that class? I will use that class instead. That means services are very powerful because you have the control. You have like hacking core, where you can change pretty much all core functionality, but you don't have to hack into core. So you can just replace it with your own code. The cons of using services, they're only available for Drupal 8. Drupal 7 and before do not have the concept of services, so you may be stuck. You can't use this method. Services can be complex. You may find a service that controls a lot of functionality, such as the whole database layer, or all of menus or menu links. You have to go through and see, understand what a service does and what methods that are part of that class that you want to replace with your own. And finally, services aren't for everything. Not everything in Drupal uses a service. Almost all functionality does, but you may find some pieces of data that are not accessible through services that you can manipulate using services. TLDR of services for data manipulation, it's hacking core without hacking core. So I'm only going to show, obviously, a Drupal 8 example of services. We have our custom module, the dflex demo module, and I've added to it an src folder with two files, demo menu linktree.php and demo service provider.php. So demo service provider, this is how a file I need to tell Drupal to use my custom service. I'm extending the service provider base, which is the base class provided by Drupal, and all I have to provide to it is an alter method. This method receives an object of dependency injection containers. They're basically, it's information about what classes control what objects. And I'm going to find on line 11, I find the definition for the container menu linktree container. And then I can change its definition, and I can tell Drupal the class that this dependency injection container should use. And I point it to my custom class, which I've defined in my menu linktree.php, my module. So in this class, I am extending the base menu linktree class provided by Drupal, so I don't have to rewrite or copy all of its code. And all I'm doing is overriding a single method for my example. I'm overriding the build function, which receives an array of the menu tree. And for this tree, I can then on lines 10 through 21, I can do some custom logic. Very similar to the logic I did when I hacked Drupal core. I'm checking to see if it's for the main menu. Line 11, I'm looping through all the menu items. And on line 12, I'm seeing if this menu item points to node 6, place its title, change its URL, set some style attributes, and target. Again, the same thing I did when I hacked Drupal core, except now I'm doing it in a service outside of core, so I'm not breaking my upgrade abilities. I'm still introducing a little bit of a security risk because, say, for whatever reason, this method of the core service was found to have a security issue. I'm using my service instead, so I'm not going to get that security update. So that's something I have to keep in mind. However, it's way better than hacking core. So user comes to my Drupal 8 site. They go to build, Drupal goes to build my menu tree. It uses my menu tree link class, my menu link class, instead of the core one, which has my custom logic, which then alters my 6th menu item here to say SS number 3. All right, finally, let's talk about the client side and ways you can manipulate data on the client side. So this is all about after data has been pulled from the database, after it's been processed through the server with PHP, and when it's being pushed and rendered to the user. how you can manipulate the data at that point. First way you can do that is with template overrides. Templates are what Drupal uses to render HTML. They're basically HTML files that have variables and placeholders in them that then Drupal swaps out using server-side processing with actual values. Because of using templates, overrides, they allow you to override Drupal's markup. You get control over the HTML that gets output. You can make template overrides very specific using what are known as template naming suggestions. Some templates allow you to provide specific names to them so that they only affect very specific pieces of data. Just like with hooks can be namespace, so can templates. So you may have one that allows you to alter data for a particular menu or a particular node or a particular entity. And you can find those suggestions and ways to get those suggestions in Drupal. And then any overrides you make are cached. So Drupal caches the output of templates. So when the second user comes to access it, it just gets the output. No additional processing is needed. The cons of using template overrides, not everything is templated. Not everything uses templates. So some things may use theme hooks or just maybe output through PHP directly. So you may not have access to template them and override their templates. Templates may be at the wrong level, which means you can maybe only template the whole menu when you just want to template menu items or a particular menu item. So you have to keep an eye about what level templates are on. And then template overrides may still require some server-side capabilities and skills. In Drupal 7 and earlier, we used the theme engine for templating as PHP template, which means you can put PHP code in your template, and PHP code is used for logic. This is very powerful, but also it's a skill set you need to be comfortable doing. TLDR of using template overrides gives you control of the rendered HTML. So on our Drupal 7 site, again, we have our sub-theme that we've been using. Into it, I've added a new folder called templates, and inside that, I have a link.tpl.php template file. So this link template file is what Drupal will use to render all links on a Drupal site. So to it, I add some arguments using PHP on line 7, my version of the template file. I'm saying if this link that you're trying to render points to node 7, then print out this static link here with this inline styling and the static title in the path. Otherwise, just Drupal print it out using the placeholders you would use. Now, link.tpl.php is a very broad template. It's used for all links on a site, not just those in the menu. So anytime on my site I have a link that points to node 7, it's going to use that static version on line 8. And I'm stuck with that. But it's good for my use case for my menu. The user comes to my site. All my menu items are links that get rendered. They hit the link template, and link number 7 hits my logic. Now is that light blue that says CS number 1. So in Drupal 8, we have a new template engine called Twig. And it's a very cool engine. If you haven't messed with Twig yet, I recommend trying it out. It's used beyond Drupal, beyond Symfony. It comes to us thanks to Symfony. And it adds some more capabilities than the old templating engine. Pros of Twig, just like template overrides, it allows you to override Drupal markup and change the HTML. Twig is more secure than the old templating engine. So before with templates, and as we saw with our previous example, you can have PHP code in your template file. You could write a database query in your template file, and it will run. Drupal will run it. That's very bad. That's very insecure. Twig does not allow you to put PHP code in your template files. However, Twig does allow server-side type logic without the need of PHP. So Twig has functionality so that you can run for loops and if statements, and you can check variables, and you can change data without having to write PHP code. The cons of using Twig: Twig is only available in Drupal 8. There may be a Drupal 7 backport. I'm not positive on that, but mainly it's Drupal 8 and beyond is what you have the ability to use Twig for. And then logic abilities are limited in Twig. So you can do some logic, but you don't have the power that you had when you had PHP and template files. I do know earlier on when we talked about integrating Twig into Drupal 8 in the Drupal community, there's a lot of backfire about this because people wanted that logic abilities and that PHP ability in their template files, even though they're wrong to want that, and they don't know that they're wrong to want that. And then finally, Twig requires a little more processing time than the template engine. This is because Twig files ultimately get rendered into, compiled into PHP, which then gets rendered. And after it gets rendered, then it gets cached, and that cached version is sent to the user. TLDR of Twig, more secure template overrides in Drupal. So again, I'm just going to use the Drupal 8 example because Twig's only in Drupal 8. We have in our subtheme for our Drupal 8 example, which again is also using a subtheme, we have a templates folder with a Twig template called menu-main.html.twig. So this is an example from the previous version of namespacing a template file and using template naming convention. So it's this Twig template will only be used for my menu that has the name of main, so my main menu. And inside my template file, this is what my Twig template looks like. You see it's HTML with some Twig code added to it. And on line 12, I'm doing some logic to see if the menu item that's being built points to page 8 and says page 8 and it's pointing to node 8, then output a static href again. Otherwise, just use your line functionality. User comes to my Drupal 8 site. Drupal builds my menu tree. It hits my menu template, my Twig template for my main menu, which hits my custom Twig logic and updates menu item number 8. And finally, you can update data on the client side and manipulate it using custom JavaScript. So the pros of using custom JavaScript allows you to manipulate any item in the DOM, anything that's available on the page to the seen or unseen to the user. If it's on the DOM, on the browser, you can manipulate it. Custom JavaScript could have your changes, your manipulations be based off user actions. So not just when the page is being loaded by Drupal, but if a user clicks on a button or an AJAX event occurs or they hover, you can choose when to change your data. And then there's less server-side processing needed by using custom JavaScript. So the processing in JavaScript happens on the client side. That means your server has to do a little less work. Cons, custom JavaScript is dependent on browser support. There are still some users in this day and age who have JavaScript turned off on their browsers for one reason or another. Maybe there's accessibility issues. Maybe they're using a screen reader. Maybe they don't trust the holes that come with allowing JavaScript. There's also a delay before JavaScript is executed. It's a small finite amount of time, but there is an amount of time when the page is being rendered when your data is being rendered on the page before JavaScript gets executed, which means your users may be seeing data that you don't want them to because you haven't changed it yet. And then custom JavaScript, if the user coming to your site is clever enough, they can alter it. They can prevent it from executing or change what's going to execute or re-execute it. So hopefully you're not writing JavaScript that makes significant changes, just small changes. TLDR of custom JavaScript, it's fancy client-side functionality. So in our Drupal 7 example, we have our custom theme. And to it, I've added a JavaScript file, dflex.js. First thing I have to do, though, in a theme to include JavaScript is I have to let Drupal know about my JavaScript. So inside my .info file, on line 10, I add to the scripts array the name of my JavaScript file and where Drupal can find it. This way, Drupal knows when it's using my theme to include this JavaScript on all pages. Now, in my JavaScript file, I'm writing what's known as a Drupal behavior, starting line 2. Drupal.behaviors is a global JavaScript object that gets executed, or the functions attached to it get executed anytime the DOM loads. So when the initial page load and then on AJAX events. So if a page loads, it hits my dflex behavior, which I'm then on lines 4 through 11, I'm just using some basic jQuery to loop through all the link items and menu tree. And on line 5, if the link points to node 9, I'm going to set some style target in what it sets. User comes to my site, that's using my custom theme. Drupal includes my custom JavaScript, the DOM loads. Drupal runs all the behaviors, including my custom behavior, which uses jQuery to run a loop through all my main menu items, hits the last menu item, matches my conditions, and alters the data. Now in Drupal 8, we have, again, our example module we've been building. Into it, I've added 2 new files, libraries.yaml and a JS folder with a JavaScript file. Now, libraries.yaml is needed because in Drupal 8, anytime a module or a theme wants to include custom JavaScript, it needs to let Drupal know about it as a library. That's what you do with libraries.yaml. It's a structure, again, a YAML file is a structured file that gives Drupal information. The first thing about a libraries file, and for a JavaScript library, on line 1, you have to provide it with what's known as an asset library name. Just a namespace, a unique name for your library. I call mine dflex_demo. Then you provide other information, like on line 3 and 4, I'm telling Drupal where to find the JavaScript for my library in relation to my module. So I say it's located in js/dflexdemo.js. Then starting on line 5, what's really cool with libraries is I can tell Drupal any dependencies my JavaScript has. So I say it has dependencies on jQuery. It has dependencies on the core Drupal JavaScript library. So Drupal will know if it's including my library on the page, it has to include those other libraries as well. In my JavaScript file that I've written, pretty much the same thing we saw from the previous example. I'm just adding to a behavior, the Drupal's behaviors object, and I'm using some jQuery code to loop through all the links in my main menu. And for the link that points to node 9, I am setting the style target, href and text. Now, finally, what I have to do for a custom module, 4 modules, is I have to let Drupal know to include my JavaScript on the page. I'm going, again, to use a hook for this. There's a hook called page attachments in Drupal 8, which gives me the render array for the page that's about to be rendered to the user. And in Drupal 8, to include JavaScript on the page, you have to attach your library to a render array. So on line 6, I am attaching to this page object, page variable, to the attached array to the library array, including my dflex_demo library. So now when a user comes to my site, Drupal starts to build my page. It hits that page attachments hook, which I tell Drupal to include my JavaScript. Drupal then reads my libraries.yaml file to find out information about my JavaScript and any dependencies it has. Drupal includes all those libraries, including my custom JavaScript, onto the page. Page renders. Drupal runs through all the custom behaviors, including the one attached from my custom JavaScript. My custom JavaScript then runs, goes through all the menu items, hits the logic on the last one, and changes it to CS number 3 green. Custom JavaScript to manipulate data. So let's review, because I've just threw a whole bunch at your faces. And what I really want to make sure you get out of this is that you realize Drupal provides many, many ways to manipulate data. There are many methods. These are just 9 ways where you can alter the same piece of data. And menu items are pretty basic data. Things that are more complex touch even more aspects of Drupal, and you can have even more control over them. And I hope you realize that, as I've been saying, there is no right way or wrong way to change something in Drupal, just the right for me way. So depending on your skill set, your comfortability with Drupal, your timeline, your budget, your urgency, those different metrics, and then weighing the pros and cons for each method, you can figure out which one of these methods is the right way for me to change the data based on my needs. So for this presentation, I have some links for you guys. The slides, this presentation, an annotated version of this presentation that you can go through is available at this bit.ly link, which is nerd15flex, flex with a capital F. And these slides, again, annotated on SlideShare, are available at nerd15flex slides. I'll put this slide back up in a moment so you can get these links again. For that, I just want to say, to me, sessions are always a work in progress, so I appreciate any feedback, things you thought were great about it, things you thought maybe could have been improved. Hit me up on Twitter, tag with Nerd Summit, or sorry, the actual tag is NerdS15. Hit me up with that, let me know, find me in the hallway. And I want to thank you guys for attending my session. If you have any questions, I think we have some time so we can take those questions. And before I do that, let me put back up the slides. So thanks.